The morning starts in chaos, as usual. Madison swings her legs out of bed before the alarm even finishes beeping, already knowing she's late. Eli, her 10-year-old, is still curled up under his blanket, a lump of warmth and resistance. She nudges his shoulder. Up, 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 she says, yanking the blanket halfway down. He groans and pulls it back. 5 more minutes. There are no 5 more minutes, bud. It's game time. She rushes to the kitchen, opening the fridge and mentally calculating breakfast options. Half a carton of milk, 2 eggs, and exactly 3 slices of bread, one of which is looking suspiciously stale. She toasts them anyway, slathers on peanut butter, and slides a plate in front of Eli, who finally appears, rubbing his eyes. Eat fast, she says, stuffing a banana into his backpack. Eli takes one bite before looking at his mom warily. You didn't pack my lunch yet, did you? Of course I did, she lies, sprinting back to the fridge. A sandwich. An apple. A handful of crackers in a plastic bag she folds over twice instead of sealing because she ran out of Ziplocs. She shoves it all in his lunchbox and hands it over just as he's shrugging on his coat. They burst out the front door, rushing to the car parked in their narrow driveway. Madison is still wearing pajama pants under her coat, but there's no time to care. She kisses Eli's cheek, gives him an encouraging push toward the school entrance, and then watches as he hesitates. Mom, my lunch, he says. Madison looks at his hands. No lunchbox. Are you kidding me? It's still on the kitchen counter. She considers her options, rush home and be late to work or let him figure it out. He looks at her with those big brown eyes, and she sighs. Okay. I'll bring it later. She speeds home, grabs the lunchbox, and gets back in the car, already knowing this means she'll be late to her cleaning shift. She doesn't even have time to change, so she just throws jeans over her pajama shorts and hopes no one notices. By the time she gets to the office building where she cleans in the mornings, she's already winded. She punches in and grabs a mop, her body moving on autopilot as she wipes floors, empties bins, and does her best not to resent every smug person who walks by in business attire, sipping their overpriced coffees. Her second job starts at noon. The grocery store is crowded as always, and she forces a smile as she scans item after item. Milk, bread, a box of cereal. Repeat. By the time her shift ends, her feet ache and her brain is fried, but there's no time to slow down. She picks up Eli from school, his lunchbox still mostly full. Sorry, Mom. They gave us pizza today. She exhales through her nose, forcing a smile. That's great, buddy. At home, she helps him with homework, trying to keep her patience as he erases the same math problem 5 times. Her eyes flicker to the laptop she left open on the kitchen counter, displaying job listings she hasn't had time to apply for. When his homework is done, she microwaves dinner, leftover pasta, slightly overcooked, and then hurries to drop him off at the neighbor's house. She secured a late interview at the temp agency, after much insistence from her part. Be good, she tells him, squeezing his shoulder. He grins. Always. The temp agency is in a nondescript office building, the kind that has artificial lighting and chairs that no one actually wants to sit in. She waits for her name to be called, drumming her fingers against her knee. Madison Bennett? She follows the recruiter, a woman named Kim, into a tiny office. Kim scans her file. So, you're looking for something stable, she says, flipping pages. Yes, Madison answers. Something full-time, if possible. Or at least enough hours to make it worth it. Kim nods. We have an opening for a receptionist at a dental office. Pays a little above minimum wage, but it's predictable hours. Madison bites the inside of her cheek. Predictable isn't enough. She needs something that actually covers rent and groceries without juggling multiple shifts. Anything higher, she asks. Kim hesitates, then leans back in her chair. Well, there is one opening. Temporary executive assistant at Valor Industries. The CEO's assistant is on maternity leave, and they need coverage. It pays well, but it's a fast-paced environment. How well does it pay? Madison asks. Kim slides a piece of paper across the desk. Madison's eyes widen. I'll take it, she blurts. Kim gives her a skeptical look. Have you worked in a corporate setting before? I've worked with people. I'm organized. I can figure it out. The recruiter raises an eyebrow but nods. Okay. I'll set up the paperwork. Can you start tomorrow? Absolutely. Madison leaves the office clutching a folder of forms, her heart pounding. This could be it. A chance to actually breathe for once. As she picks up Eli, she lets herself imagine it. Maybe even a weekend off. Maybe a savings account that isn't just wishful thinking. She smiles as she drives home, already planning what she'll wear tomorrow. Madison pulls into the parking garage of Valor Industries with a sense of awe and mild panic. The building is enormous, all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like it has something to prove. She grips the steering wheel for a few extra seconds, taking a deep breath. It's just a job, she reminds herself. People work in places like this every day. She can, too. Inside, the lobby looks like something out of a movie. A sleek marble floor stretches endlessly beneath her sneakers, and the ceilings are so high she swears they touch the sky. Employees rush past in tailored suits, clutching tablets and lattes, moving with an urgency she has never experienced in any job she's had. A woman at the front desk greets her without looking up from her computer. Name? Madison Bennett. I'm starting today as the 16th floor, the woman interrupts, already moving on to the next task. Madison hesitates, then nods and makes her way to the elevators. She presses the button and waits, wondering if this job might actually be beyond her skill set. When the doors open, she steps inside, shoulder to shoulder with two men discussing something about projections and market trends. She does her best to look like she belongs. When she arrives on the 16th floor, the pace is even faster. Phones ring, people stride through the hallways with purpose, and she feels like she's accidentally stepped onto the set of a high-stakes drama. A woman in a navy dress waves her over. You must be the temp. I'm Claire, the assistant you're replacing. She talks fast, walking even faster. I'm heading out today, so we don't have much time. Follow me. Madison hurries after her, dodging people left and right. Claire leads her into a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that looks like it belongs to someone who makes terrifyingly important decisions. Okay, so this is where you'll be, Claire says, dumping a thick stack of papers on the desk. Standard stuff, calendar management, calls, emails, reports. Oh, and sign these before I go. HR sent them this morning. Madison blinks at the mountain of paperwork. All of these? Yep, just the usual onboarding. Standard contracts, company policies, some confidentiality forms. Sign wherever there's an X. Claire is already moving on, pointing at the computer. This is your login. I set up your email, and IT should be sending your credentials soon. Oh, and the weekly reports need to be formatted before the senior leadership meeting. The finance guys like it a certain way. You'll figure it out. Madison flips through the paperwork, skimming at best. She doesn't have time to read the fine print. Claire is already halfway out the door. Not wanting to seem slow, she grabs a pen and starts signing. Wait, what's my boss's name again? She asks. Sebastian Hayes, but he's traveling for a few weeks, Claire says over her shoulder. You probably won't even see him before I'm back. She barely finishes the sentence before she's gone, her heels clicking against the floor at an alarming speed. Madison stares after her, then looks down at the final document, signing it with a relieved sigh. The door swings open again, and a man in a crisp suit steps inside. "Morning, Ms. Bennett," he says. Madison blinks. "Morning." HR sent the update, he continues, handing her a folder. "We've adjusted the system. As acting CEO, you now have full access to company files, meeting logs, and executive correspondence. IT will be here shortly to update your permissions." Madison freezes. "I'm sorry, what?" The man doesn't even look up. "Everything has been transferred. If you need anything, let me know." Then he's gone. She stares at the door, then at the folder in her hands, then at the nameplate on the desk. Sebastian Hayes, CEO. Her stomach drops. The computer dings with an incoming email. Madison clicks it open, praying this is some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, she finds a subject line that reads, "Welcome to your new role, acting CEO of Valor Industries." Her hands are clammy. This can't be real. But as she scrolls, the details are too specific to be a prank. Apparently, due to an HR glitch, she has been entered into the system as the interim CEO while Sebastian is away. The employees don't know her real position, and no one is questioning it. She glances around, expecting someone to burst in and tell her there's been a mistake. But everyone outside the office is still moving at full speed, like this is all perfectly normal. The intercom on her desk crackles to life. "Ms. Bennett, your assistant is here. Would you like to go over your schedule for the day?" Assistant? She has an assistant now? Her mouth opens, then closes. She needs to fix this. She needs to tell someone. But who? If she calls HR, they'll realize she mistakenly signed something she shouldn't have, and that might get her fired. If she admits the mistake now, would they think she did this on purpose? She needs time. Hold my calls, she says, barely believing the words are coming out of her mouth. The intercom clicks off. She slumps into the massive chair behind the desk, staring at the city skyline. This cannot be happening. She spends the rest of the day hiding in the office, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. She clicks through emails, nods along in meetings she doesn't understand, and does her best not to draw attention to the fact that she has no idea what she's doing. By late afternoon, she manages to slip out. She walks fast, keeping her head down, weaving through the lobby like she's escaping a crime scene. Once outside, she breathes in the cold air, half expecting security to chase her down. Her stomach twists. She has to figure out how to fix this before tomorrow. But right now, she has to make it to Eli's school. She pulls into the parking lot just in time to see him standing outside, chatting with his friends. The moment he spots her, he waves excitedly. "You made it," he says, climbing into the car. "I told everyone you got a fancy new job." Madison forces a smile, gripping the steering wheel. "Yeah," she says, her voice slightly hysterical. "Something like that." Madison wakes up with a jolt, her heart hammering before she even remembers why. Then it all comes flooding back, the gleaming office, the mistake, the HR email calling her the acting CEO of Valor Industries. She groans and presses a pillow over her face. She has to fix this. She will walk in, march straight to HR, and confess everything. She'll explain the misunderstanding, apologize, and ask them to sort it out before someone realizes an unqualified single mom who just yesterday was scanning grocery items is now leading a billion-dollar company. She pictures how it'll go. HR will nod sympathetically, then call security to escort her out. Or worse, they'll assume she did it on purpose and press charges. Or they'll just laugh in her face and tell the entire company about the woman who thought she could fake her way into the C-suite. She groans again. Eli bursts into the room, already dressed, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom, come on. You'll make me late." "Right. The real world still exists." She hauls herself out of bed, slaps together a peanut butter sandwich for his lunch, and drives him to school, nodding absently as he chatters about his soccer game this weekend. As soon as he hops out of the car, she grips the steering wheel. Just get through today. That's all she has to do. She'll handle the fallout somehow. When she arrives at Valor Industries, she moves quickly, keeping her head down, planning her direct route to HR. But as she steps onto her floor, a bright, chipper voice stops her in her tracks. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett." She turns, blinking at a woman standing in the hallway holding a tablet. She's young, put together, and watching Madison expectantly. Hi. "I'm Sophie," the woman says, smiling. "The temp agency sent me over. I'll be assisting you while you're acting CEO." Madison stares. "You have an assistant," Sophie adds, as if that clears things up. Madison forces a tight smile. "Of course. Because I need one." "Exactly. I already got the morning brief from the team. We have a budget review at 10, and then legal needs approval on a contract by noon." Madison nods slowly, trying to keep up. "And there's a board meeting at 4. Her stomach drops. "A what?" Sophie scrolls through her tablet. "You're expected to weigh in on the expansion project. The department heads will present their reports. I can prep you with the key points ahead of time." A board meeting. The words swirl in Madison's head like a bad joke. "Of course," she says, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Sounds great. Let's do that." Sophie grins. "Great. I'll be at my desk if you need anything." As she walks away, Madison grips the edge of her desk. So much for confessing. There's no way to back out now. If she tells HR, the board will wonder why she disappeared right before a major meeting, and that might raise more questions than answers. She lowers herself into the chair, still feeling like an imposter. Her fingers hover over the keyboard, unsure what an actual CEO does at 9 in the morning. An email pops up. From Julian Carter, the CFO. "Looking forward to the board meeting this afternoon. We'll need clarity on your stance regarding the expansion." Her stance? She doesn't have a stance. She doesn't even know what they're expanding. She resists the urge to slam her head against the desk. Instead, she does what any reasonable person would do in a crisis. She Googles what does a CEO do in a board meeting. Most of the results are wildly unhelpful, full of buzzwords like vision alignment and strategic forecasting. Nothing about how to survive when you have no idea what's going on. She clicks open her calendar and stares at the meeting invite. 2 hours. She has 2 hours to figure out how not to make a fool of herself. Then another problem smacks her in the face. Eli. She was supposed to pick him up from school at 4:30. The board meeting is at 4 o'clock. She grabs her phone and dials her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, a sweet older woman who has helped in a pinch before. "Madison, hello." "Hi, Mrs. Alvarez, I hate to ask, but could you pick up Eli from school today? I got stuck at work." "Of course, Mija. I can take him to my house for a bit." Relief washes over her. "You're a lifesaver." "Thank you." With that settled, she turns back to her laptop, attempting to absorb as much information as possible before the meeting. At exactly 3:55, Sophie peeks in. "Ready?" Madison nods, standing up and smoothing down her blazer, a piece she bought years ago for job interviews and barely ever wears. As she walks into the boardroom, she reminds herself to breathe. She just needs to get through this. Madison steps into the boardroom with the same energy as someone walking into an exam they forgot to study for. The room is massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and a table so long it could double as a runway. Seated around it are at least a dozen executives, all in perfectly tailored suits, all exuding the kind of confidence that comes from years of knowing exactly what they're doing. She, on the other hand, has spent the last 15 minutes frantically Googling, what does a CEO do in a board meeting, and coming up with nothing helpful. Her assistant, Sophie, pulls out a chair for her. Would you like coffee before we start? Yes, Madison says, then immediately regrets it. Did CEOs even fetch their own coffee? Was she supposed to have a special order? Was there some kind of secret executive-level espresso no one told her about? Too late to take it back. Sophie disappears, and Madison sits, gripping the armrests of her chair like it might try to throw her off. The executives are already deep in conversation, throwing around words like market saturation and operational scalability, and she hopes no one expects her to contribute. Maybe she can just nod and pretend to take notes. Julian Carter, the CFO, clears his throat, and the room falls silent. He's the kind of man who commands attention without even trying. His suit is crisp, his watch probably costs more than her car, and he watches her the way a cat watches a mouse that's wandered too close. Let's begin, he says. The meeting kicks off with reports, sales figures, department updates, discussions about investments that involve too many acronyms for her to follow. Madison nods, furrows her brow at random moments to look engaged, and prays no one asks her a direct question. Half an hour in, the conversation shifts to an expansion project, something about opening a new branch overseas. We need a firm decision on this, Julian says, his sharp gaze landing on Madison. Do we move forward or not? The room goes silent. Every executive turns to look at her. Her stomach drops. She glances down at the papers in front of her, as if the answer might magically appear. It doesn't. What it does say is a lot of corporate jargon she doesn't understand. Her mouth goes dry. If she says nothing, they'll think she's incompetent. If she gives a random answer, they'll see through her immediately. Panic swells in her chest. And then, by some miracle, she hears herself speak. Well, she says slowly, what's the worst-case scenario? The executives blink. Julian folds his arms. Excuse me? She clears her throat. Let's say we do the expansion. What's the worst thing that could happen? The head of operations frowns. If the market isn't ready, we could suffer major losses. And if we don't expand, she asks. We risk missing a key growth opportunity, another executive says. Madison leans forward like she's actually thought this through. So either way, there's risk. The question is, which risk can we afford? Silence. Then, shockingly, a few people nod. That's a valid point, someone murmurs. Actually, if we analyze worst-case projections against potential gains, we might see a clearer strategy. Madison has no idea what that means, but it sounds positive. Julian, however, is still watching her. The meeting continues, and she does her best to stay quiet while executives discuss her point like it was some stroke of genius. When it finally ends, they file out, and a few even look impressed. Julian lingers. He leans against the table, arms crossed. That was an interesting approach. She forces a smile. Glad you liked it. His lips curve slightly, but it's not a friendly smile. It's the kind of smile that says he's putting pieces together. I'll see you tomorrow, he says, then walks out. Madison barely exhales before Sophie appears at her side. You did great. Sophie says brightly. Did I? Madison asks, dazed. Sophie hands her a printed schedule for the next day. See you in the morning. Madison stares at the empty boardroom. Somehow, against all logic, she survived. She doesn't even realize how late it is until she pulls into her driveway. The house is quiet, except for the soft glow from Eli's bedroom window. Inside, she finds him already in bed, half asleep. She brushes a hand through his messy hair, and he blinks up at her. "Did your fancy job go okay?" he mumbles. She smiles. "Yeah, bud. It actually did." He nods sleepily and turns over. She heads to the kitchen, pulling open the fridge and staring blankly inside, too tired to actually eat. She should quit. This whole thing is a disaster waiting to happen. Julian already suspects something, and it's only a matter of time before someone realizes the mistake. If she walks away now, she can still claim ignorance. But then she thinks about today. The way she handled that meeting, not perfectly, but not terribly either. The way the board listened to her. The way she felt, for the first time in a long time, like she was actually in control of something. She shuts the fridge and presses her forehead against the cool surface. One more day. Just one more. And then she'll figure out the rest. Across the city, Julian Carter steps into his office, closing the door behind him. He picks up his phone and dials a number, waiting as the line rings once, twice, before being picked up. He leans against his desk, his gaze fixed on the city skyline as he speaks. His voice is low, measured, delivering a detailed account of the day's events. There's a pause as he listens, then a slight shift in his expression, something unreadable passing over his face. He says a few more words before hanging up. Then, without another look, he places his phone down and exits the office. In a different time zone, Sebastian Hayes puts his own phone down, staring thoughtfully out his window. Madison walks into the office with her head held a little higher than yesterday. She still doesn't belong here, that much is obvious, but somehow, miraculously, she hasn't been thrown out yet. If she can survive one terrifying board meeting, maybe she can handle another day of pretending. Sophie greets her the moment she steps off the elevator, walking briskly beside her. "Good morning. I took the liberty of organizing your emails by priority, and there are a few calls scheduled before lunch. Also, the legal team needs your input on the contract for the expansion." Madison nods, pretending she fully understands what that means. "Right. Of course." Her private office is pristine, with floor-to-ceiling windows that make her feel like she's hovering above the city. Her desk is massive, intimidating, covered in neatly stacked files she has no idea how to read. She sits, takes a deep breath, and opens her inbox. Emails flood the screen, all filled with corporate jargon, numbers, and people expecting decisions. She clicks on one at random, a request from some department about resource allocation. She has no idea what that means. Instead of panicking, she does what she does best, she trusts her instincts. She replies with something vague but reasonable: "I appreciate your thorough assessment. Let's ensure we're optimizing existing resources before allocating more." She doesn't know if that's the right answer, but it sounds convincing. A few emails later, her phone rings. She stares at it for a second before cautiously picking up. Hello? "Ms. Bennett," a voice says. "This is Lauren from Public Relations. I wanted to run something by you." Madison quickly clicks open a blank document, preparing to take notes. "Absolutely. The media request about the charity initiative, should we approve the interview or hold off?" Madison has no idea what initiative she's talking about. She buys herself a few seconds by sipping her coffee. "What's your recommendation?" Lauren hesitates. "Well, it's good press, but we want to be strategic about timing." Madison nods, even though Lauren can't see her. "Right. Let's time it with something bigger. Make it more impactful." A pause. Then Lauren responds, impressed. "That makes sense. I'll coordinate accordingly." Madison hangs up, staring at the phone like it might explode. She just made an actual decision. A real one. The day goes on like this, more emails, more phone calls, more decisions made purely on gut instinct. Somehow, it keeps working. But Julian is watching her. She spots him at the other end of the hallway, standing with a group of executives, listening to one of them speak while his eyes flicker in her direction. Later, when she steps out for coffee, she sees him at the break station, stirring his drink too slowly, like he's waiting for her to say something. She doesn't. She dodges him all morning, making sure their conversations are brief, professional, and uninteresting. She has no idea how much he suspects, but she knows one thing: Julian Carter is the kind of man who pays attention to details, and she is a very big, very confusing detail. At lunchtime, Sophie walks in with a menu. "Would you like me to order lunch from the executive catering service?" Madison blinks. "That's a thing?" Sophie nods. "Of course. There's a private menu for senior leadership. Everything is delivered fresh from a 5-star restaurant." Madison stares at the menu, her stomach growling. She usually eats whatever half sandwich Eli doesn't finish from his lunchbox. She casually shrugs. "Sure, that sounds fine." An hour later, a chef-prepared meal arrives: salmon with roasted vegetables, a side of something fancy she can't even pronounce. She eats at her desk, half expecting someone to barge in and revoke her privileges, but no one does. The perks of this world are overwhelming. A private office, catered meals, a personal assistant who organizes her life before she even asks. It's the kind of thing she never imagined having. But it comes with stress. Every time she opens an email, she worries she'll misinterpret something important. Every time she takes a call, she wonders if she's agreeing to something catastrophic. Every time she walks past Julian, her heart races, convinced today is the day he calls her bluff. By the time she leaves, her body is exhausted, her brain overworked. But she made it. She pulls into the driveway, stepping into the warm familiarity of home, where Eli is already at the table with his homework spread out. "Hey, kiddo," she says, kicking off her shoes. Eli looks up, grinning. "Did you do any fancy CEO stuff today?" She thinks about the emails, the calls, the 5-star salmon. You could say that. She opens the fridge, scanning for something easy. There's leftover pasta, a few vegetables that are probably past their prime, and a pack of frozen chicken nuggets. She goes with the nuggets. Eli swings his legs under the table. "I scored a goal in gym today." "That's awesome," she says, sliding the tray into the oven. "You should have seen it," he continues, launching into a play-by-play of the kick, the defenders, the final moment when the ball hit the net. She listens, letting the sound of his voice ground her after a day spent pretending to be someone else. The timer dings. She pulls the nuggets from the oven and plates them up, grabbing a bottle of ketchup. Eli dips a nugget and takes a bite. "Are you coming to my game on Saturday?" She hesitates, thinking about work. About how things are spiraling into something bigger than she expected. But she doesn't want to miss this. "Of course," she says. "Wouldn't miss it." Eli beams. She watches him eat, feeling something she hasn't felt in a long time. Not just relief. Not just exhaustion. Something close to pride. She made it through another day. She's still standing. And against all logic, she's actually doing this. Madison steps off the elevator into the usual whirlwind of activity, expecting another day of keeping up appearances and dodging Julian's scrutinizing gaze. But something is different. The energy feels charged, conversations are whispered but urgent, and people glance her way more than usual. She grips her coffee cup a little tighter. Something is up. Sophie appears at her side before she even reaches her office. "Ms. Bennett, just a quick update, Mr. Hayes is arriving tomorrow morning." The words hit like a slap. Her stomach drops. "Sebastian Hayes?" she asks, as if there could be another. Sophie nods, oblivious to the fact that Madison suddenly wants to sink through the floor. Yes. There's a lot to prepare, but don't worry, everyone's on it. Sophie beams. You're going to meet him. Isn't that exciting? Exciting. That's one way to put it. Another way would be catastrophic. Madison smiles tightly, nodding as if this is the most normal news in the world, then escapes into her office before she loses her composure in public. She shuts the door, sets her coffee down, and presses her hands against the desk, inhaling slowly. Sebastian Hayes is coming back. Tomorrow. She barely made it through a board meeting without exposing herself, and now the actual CEO will be walking through those doors expecting, what, exactly? For her to brief him? For her to have competent answers to whatever questions he throws at her? For her to be someone she is absolutely, unquestionably not? There's still time to quit. She could claim a sudden illness. A family emergency. An unexpected relocation to another country. But as soon as she pictures running away, she knows she won't do it. She isn't a con artist trying to get away with something. This was a mistake, and mistakes have consequences. She owes it to herself, if not to the entire company, to at least try to face them. She tries to nod, to play it cool, but her brain is already short-circuiting. She knew this wouldn't last forever. Eventually, someone would catch the mistake, but she had hoped she'd have more time to figure out an exit strategy. Sophie is still talking. Something about schedules, adjustments, and staff greetings. Madison nods absently, staring at her untouched coffee. Right. Okay, she says, even though none of this is okay. She half expects Sophie to leave, but instead, she lingers. Oh, I almost forgot, Julian asked to see you. Madison stiffens. Did he say why? No, just that it was important. Madison forces a smile. Great. Love important things. Sophie hurries off, and Madison exhales slowly. She should quit. She should quit. Walk into HR, tell them everything, and accept whatever fallout comes next. But what would happen then? They might press charges. They might humiliate her in front of the entire company. And even if they didn't, she would have to start all over again. No job, no paycheck, no way to make rent next month. She rubs her temples. She has to at least try to fix this. Julian's office is at the end of the hall, and the door is open when she arrives. He's seated behind his desk, glancing at his watch like he expected her to be there 5 minutes ago. She steps inside, not aware he is the one who should have gone to the CEO's office. She kept her posture straight, like someone who has nothing to hide, even though she has everything to hide. You wanted to see me? He doesn't say anything right away, just watches her. His expression is unreadable, which somehow makes it worse. Sebastian's return has people anxious, he says finally. Madison nods. So I've heard. The team will expect you to lead the preparations, he continues, studying her reaction. Right. She swallows. Preparations. Julian tilts his head slightly. I assume you have a plan. Madison doesn't breathe for a solid 3 seconds. He is testing her. Poking at her disguise, waiting for it to slip. Of course, she says, keeping her voice even. Julian watches her for another beat, then nods. Good. I'll check in later. That's it. No accusations, no pointed remarks. She turns and walks out, resisting the urge to break into a run. The rest of the morning is chaos. Employees pop into her office, asking about schedules, security details, catering preferences. Apparently, Sebastian has a preferred brand of coffee, and someone is genuinely worried about what will happen if it's not stocked in the break room. She tries to keep up, nodding, delegating, pretending like she has any control over this. Every time she thinks she might be in the clear, someone else appears with another question. Do you want a formal welcome speech or something casual? Will you be greeting him at the entrance or letting him go straight to his office? What's the status on the quarterly review notes? At some point, she locks herself in her office just to get a moment to breathe. Julian is still watching her. Not directly, not always, but she can feel it. The occasional glance from across the floor, the way he lingers in meetings just long enough to make her paranoid. He knows something. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense that something is off. She doesn't know if he's waiting for her to fail or if he's just enjoying the spectacle. The thought makes her dizzy. She could still leave. Walk away, pretend this never happened, and hope the company doesn't come after her for fraud. But there's something deep inside her that won't let her. She started this mess, even if by accident. She should face the consequences. She closes her eyes and exhales. Just one more day. Then, if she's still standing, she'll figure out the next move. Madison arrives at the office before the sun has fully risen, gripping a coffee so tightly it might crack the cup. She doesn't even remember sleeping. If she did, it wasn't restful. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible way this day could go wrong. Security marching her out. HR demanding an explanation. Julian smirking as he finally exposes her. Or worse, Sebastian Hayes himself calling her into his office, looking at her across his massive CEO desk, and asking the only question she has no answer to: who are you? She steps into the elevator, watching the numbers climb. She should have quit yesterday. Disappeared before his plane even landed. But something kept her from doing it. She had told herself it was because running would look suspicious, but deep down, she knows the truth. She wasn't ready to let it go. The doors slide open. The office is humming with energy, people moving faster than usual, voices hushed but urgent. Every conversation is about one thing. He just landed. Security is coordinating the entrance. They're prepping his office now. It's happening. The real CEO is back. She clutches her coffee and moves quickly toward her office, hoping to make it through the morning unnoticed. Sophie appears in her doorway before she can even sit down. Good morning. It's a big day. Madison forces a nod. Sure is. Sophie is practically glowing. Sebastian will be here any minute. Everyone's on high alert. But don't worry, I made sure everything is prepped just how you wanted it. How she wanted it. That's what's insane. People still think she's the one calling the shots. She wants to correct Sophie, tell her this is all a mistake, but her throat feels like it's filled with cement. I'll check in later, Sophie chirps before disappearing. Madison stares at her desk, willing herself to breathe. This is it. The moment everything crumbles. She hears the commotion before she sees him. A wave of hushed urgency sweeps through the office, conversations dying down, people straightening their posture. Madison stands, unable to help herself, stepping toward her doorway just as he walks in. Sebastian Hayes is not what she expected. He isn't stiff or severe like she imagined. He moves through the office like someone who owns the space without needing to remind anyone. He's dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, but there's an ease about him, like he doesn't take things too seriously. His expression is calm, unreadable. He shakes a few hands, offers brief smiles, listens as people rush to update him. Madison holds her breath, waiting for him to look her way. Any second now, someone will tell him. The woman standing in that office? The one everyone assumes is in charge? Yeah, no one actually knows who she is. But it doesn't happen. Sebastian doesn't call for her. He doesn't glance in her direction. He walks straight past her office without stopping. She blinks. Nothing. No dramatic confrontation. No angry demands. No security dragging her out. She sits slowly, gripping the edge of her desk. Did he not hear about her? Had no one told him? Or did he just not care? Meetings continue, emails roll in, and employees still come to her with questions, like nothing has changed. She forces herself to move through the motions, to answer emails, to approve things she doesn't understand. She keeps waiting for someone to tell her it's over, but the hours slip by, and no one does. Julian appears at her door around midday. Busy? He asks, leaning casually against the frame. She knows better than to believe he ever does anything casually. Just catching up, she says, clicking randomly on her screen. His gaze lingers on her, measuring. It's been an interesting morning. She nods, waiting for him to continue, to say whatever it is he really means. But he doesn't. He just watches her a moment longer, then nods once. See you in the meeting. And then he's gone. She exhales sharply, pressing her hands against the desk to steady herself. She makes it through the afternoon, floating through meetings, nodding at things she doesn't fully understand, giving non-answers that somehow satisfy people. Every so often, she catches glimpses of Sebastian through the glass walls of conference rooms, always engaged, always listening. But he never looks at her. Never acknowledges her existence. It makes no sense. By the end of the day, her nerves are completely shot. She grabs her bag, practically jogging to the elevator, needing to escape before reality catches up to her. She barely makes it to Eli's school in time, pulling up as he waves at her from the steps. You're late, he says, climbing in. Traffic, she lies. Eli kicks his feet against the seat. Did you do CEO stuff today? She grips the steering wheel. Yeah, bud. I did. That night, she tosses and turns, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in her body tense. It doesn't make sense. Sebastian has to know something is wrong. Someone must have told him. But then why hasn't he said anything? She rolls over, pressing her pillow over her head, willing herself to sleep. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'll have answers. Madison wakes up to the sound of birds chirping, the unusual, almost unsettling, absence of an alarm blaring in her ear. For the first time in days, she hasn't woken up in a cold sweat, dreading whatever fresh disaster might be waiting at Valor Industries. Because she isn't going back. She made her decision last night, somewhere between staring at the ceiling and pressing her face into the pillow to smother her own groan of frustration. She's done. Whatever ridiculous game was being played there, whatever Julian was circling, whatever Sebastian was ignoring, wasn't her problem anymore. She turns over, expecting to see the time flashing some ungodly hour, but instead, it's a completely reasonable 7:30. The house is quiet except for Eli rustling around in his room, probably getting ready for school. The realization hits that she doesn't have to leap out of bed, throw on a blazer, and pretend to be someone she isn't. She can take her time. The thought is so foreign it almost makes her laugh. Eli pokes his head into her room, toothbrush hanging from his mouth. Are you sick? She props herself up on one elbow. No, why? You're still in bed. You never stay in bed. Just taking the morning slow, she says, stretching. Do you want pancakes? His eyes light up, foam dribbling down his chin. Really? Really? She gets up and makes good on her promise, flipping pancakes on the griddle while Eli sits at the table, kicking his legs under his chair. Usually, breakfast is a frantic race against the clock, toast in one hand, coffee in the other, yelling at Eli to find his shoes. But today, she actually sits with him, sipping her coffee while he tells her about his upcoming soccer game. She nods, actually listening, not just half-hearing between emails and traffic lights. When it's time to drop him off, she doesn't feel like she's abandoning him in favor of an imposter life. She pulls up to the school, watches as he slings his backpack over one shoulder, and gives her a casual wave. See you later, kiddo, she calls. He grins and takes off toward the entrance. She drives away without the usual pit in her stomach, without the feeling that she's running out of time. Instead of rushing into a high-rise full of people waiting for her to fail, she runs errands like a normal person. She picks up groceries, wanders through the aisles without checking her watch, grabs a coffee at a small cafe and sits outside, actually enjoying the sun on her face. It's been a while since she's done something as simple as sitting. She scrolls through job postings on her phone, sighing as she realizes her options are still as bleak as before. No executive assistant positions, that's for sure. She doesn't have the qualifications for anything close to what she just did, well, pretended to do. The irony isn't lost on her. Her thumb hovers over a listing for a receptionist position before she decides she needs a break from all things job-related. Instead, she does something she hasn't done in way too long. She calls Audrey. "Are you alive?" Audrey answers immediately. "Barely. Do I need to come get you? Are you being held hostage?" "Technically, no." That doesn't sound reassuring. "Meet me for coffee?" Already grabbing my keys. 20 minutes later, Madison slides into a booth across from Audrey, who is watching her like she's expecting a confession. "So," Audrey says, stirring her latte. "Are you going to tell me why you vanished into the corporate void and didn't text me back for a week?" Madison exhales, bracing herself. "I may have accidentally become the CEO of a billion-dollar company." Audrey stops stirring. "I'm sorry, what?" Madison launches into the story, sparing no details: the paperwork mix-up, the HR mistake, the moment she realized she was in over her head, the board meetings, Julian's suspicions, and most baffling of all, Sebastian's complete lack of reaction. By the time she's done, Audrey is clutching her stomach from laughing so hard. "This is not funny," Madison insists. Audrey wipes her eyes. "It's a little funny. It was terrifying. I bet. But also kind of amazing." Madison groans, resting her forehead against the table. "I can't believe I lasted this long. I feel like I should be arrested." Audrey smirks. "For what? Accidentally being too good at pretending?" "I wasn't good at it." "You didn't get fired on the spot." "That's saying something." Madison shakes her head. "It doesn't matter. I didn't go in today. I'm officially back to job hunting." Audrey's smirk fades. "Did they pay you?" Madison straightens. "What?" "For the days you worked." "You worked, Madison. They owe you money." Madison shifts in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable. "I can't ask for that. I wasn't supposed to be there." "Yeah, but they screwed up." "Not you. I signed the wrong paperwork." "Which they gave you." Madison chews on her lip. "I don't know. What if they think I did it on purpose? What if they come after me legally?" Audrey leans back. "You really think they care that much?" Madison doesn't answer. Audrey sighs. "Fine. Be morally superior. But if they do pay you, and you don't cash the check, I will personally come over and smack you." Madison rolls her eyes. They spend another hour catching up, talking about normal things: Audrey's terrible coworker, Eli's latest soccer obsession, the bakery that just opened down the street. By the time they part ways, Madison almost feels like herself again. It lasts exactly 2 hours. Her phone rings just as she's making a late lunch at home. She glances at the screen and nearly drops the spoon in her hand. It's an unfamiliar number, but the caller ID says Valor Industries. Her stomach twists. She hesitates, then picks up. "Hello?" "Ms. Bennett," a professional voice says. "This is Melanie from Mr. Hayes' office. He asked me to reach out. He was expecting you today." Madison swallows. "Oh. Right. I wasn't feeling well. There's a pause. I see. He'd like to meet with you. Would you be available this afternoon? She grips the counter. I have to pick up my son from school. Another pause. Understood. Would tomorrow morning work? She is fully prepared for a fight, for legal threats, for some kind of demand that she explain herself immediately. Instead, Melanie sounds completely unbothered. Madison stares at the fridge, heart pounding. Tomorrow? Yes. 9 a.m. There is no accusation in her voice. No suspicion. Just a simple statement of fact. She opens her mouth, trying to come up with a way to refuse, but the words don't come. Okay, she says. Great. See you then. The line goes dead. She stands there, phone still pressed to her ear, wondering what exactly just happened. Madison pulls into the parking garage of Valor Industries with the same feeling one might have before walking into a courtroom for sentencing. Her fingers grip the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turn white. She had barely slept, alternating between convincing herself that everything would be fine and imagining every possible scenario in which her life implodes. By now, she's exhausted, jittery, and seconds away from turning the car around and driving until she finds a town where no one has ever heard of Valor Industries. But she can't. She's here. She agreed to this meeting. She has to face whatever consequences are coming. The elevator ride to the 16th floor feels like an eternity. When the doors slide open, the office is as pristine and intimidating as ever. The only difference is that today, everyone knows Sebastian Hayes is here. She can feel the energy in the air, quieter conversations, quickened footsteps, nervous glances exchanged between employees. Sophie spots her immediately. Good morning, Ms. Bennett. Madison is too nervous to correct her. Mr. Hayes is expecting you, Sophie continues. You can go right in. She hesitates, looking toward the massive glass doors that lead to the CEO's office. A place she has somehow managed to avoid until now. Her legs feel unsteady as she crosses the floor. She lifts a hand, knocks once, and barely hears the "come in" before pushing the door open. Sebastian Hayes is seated behind his desk, flipping through a file. He doesn't immediately look up. He doesn't gesture for her to sit. He just turns a page, expression unreadable. She steps inside, standing awkwardly in the vast space. The silence stretches. Her heart pounds. This is it. This is where he tells her they're suing her. That she's committed fraud. That she's lucky they aren't pressing charges, but she can never set foot in this building again. She braces herself. And then, suddenly, he starts laughing. Not a polite chuckle. Not a smirk. Full, genuine laughter. Madison blinks. Sebastian leans back in his chair, still laughing. He finally looks up at her, shaking his head. I have to tell you, this is the most ridiculous thing I've seen in years. She doesn't know how to respond. He gestures toward the chair in front of him. Sit, Madison. You're making me nervous just standing there. She hesitates, then lowers herself into the seat. Sebastian clasps his hands together, studying her. So, would you like to explain how exactly this happened? She exhales, feeling her pulse slow just a little. It was a mistake. A stupid, ridiculous mistake. I gathered that much. I was supposed to be the assistant to the CEO's assistant. Temporary, just while she was on maternity leave. But HR messed up the paperwork, and I signed without reading because, she stops herself, but he's already smiling. Because you were trying to be efficient, he finishes. She nods. Sebastian leans back, considering this. And once you realized? She shifts uncomfortably. I tried to fix it. I swear, I did. But then people kept coming to me with questions, and they just assumed I belonged. And every time I thought about admitting the mistake, I panicked. It felt impossible. So you just kept going? She lets out a humorless laugh. Yes. Against all logic, I did. Sebastian shakes his head again, but there's no anger in his expression. If anything, he looks amused. Julian said you handled board meetings like you belonged there. Madison groans. Julian is suspicious of everything I do. I was sure he was going to expose me any second. Sebastian's smile lingers. And yet, he didn't. She hesitates. Why didn't he? Sebastian leans forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Because, despite the absurdity of it all, you didn't fail. In fact, you held your own. That's impressive. She stares at him. That shouldn't be impressive. I have no business being here. Perhaps. But I've seen executives with years of experience crumble under pressure, and yet you, someone with zero experience, stepped into boardrooms and made decisions. Madison folds her arms. I wouldn't exactly call what I did decisive. Sebastian lifts a brow. You bluffed your way through meetings, de-escalated crises, and somehow convinced a room full of executives that you belonged. How did you manage that? She shrugs. Honestly? Being a single mom. It's the same skill set. Sebastian tilts his head. I spend most of my time winging it. Making last-minute judgment calls. Juggling way too many responsibilities. Talking my way out of disasters. Just because the disasters usually involve science projects and forgotten lunches doesn't mean the experience doesn't transfer. Sebastian laughs again, shaking his head. That might be the best explanation I've ever heard. Madison exhales, some of the weight on her chest lifting. So, what happens now? Sebastian reaches into a drawer, pulls out a check, and slides it across the desk. She stares at it. That's for the time you did work, he says. It's only fair. She hesitates before picking it up. She expects some sort of catch, but there isn't one. It's a paycheck. An actual, legitimate paycheck. You're paying me? You worked. You should be paid. She grips the check, barely processing what's happening. I don't know what to say. Sebastian smirks. I do. Never do something like this again. Madison lets out a breathless laugh. Trust me, I won't. She stands, clutching the check like it might vanish if she blinks too hard. She turns toward the door, hesitating just for a second. Sebastian? He looks up. Why didn't you just fire me on the spot? He studies her for a moment, then smiles. Because you were interesting. She has no idea what to make of that, so she just nods and walks out. She practically floats through the office, ignoring the curious glances from employees who still don't know what she was doing there. She doesn't care. She just made it out unscathed. She gets in her car, stares at the check again, and lets out a disbelieving laugh. She speeds home, barely able to sit still. When she bursts through the front door, Eli is on the couch, flipping through channels. Mom? He asks, confused. Why are you smiling like that? She holds up the check. We're ordering pizza. Eli jumps up. Seriously? Seriously. Extra large. With breadsticks. Eli pumps his fist. Best day ever. They spend the evening eating pizza straight from the box, watching a movie, and for the first time in days, Madison doesn't feel like she's holding her breath. She did it. She survived. Madison wakes up to the sound of her phone buzzing against her nightstand. She groans, rolling over, barely cracking one eye open. She's still half asleep, still warm under the covers, still enjoying the rare feeling of having nothing urgent to do. She had done it. She had survived her ridiculous CEO mistake, somehow walked away with a paycheck and no criminal charges, and last night she and Eli had celebrated with an irresponsible amount of pizza and movies. The phone keeps buzzing. She finally reaches for it, glancing at the screen. An unknown number. She debates ignoring it, but something in her gut tells her to answer. Hello? Good morning, Ms. Bennett. A professional, vaguely familiar voice. This is Melanie from Mr. Hayes' office. Madison sits up immediately, heart pounding. Oh. Hi. I mean, good morning. Mr. Hayes would like to see you again today. Are you available to come in? She stares at the ceiling, brain scrambling. Is this about the check? No, this is a separate matter. Her stomach tightens. So much for being in the clear. Maybe this was it. Maybe Sebastian had spent the night rethinking things, realizing he should be angrier, that she shouldn't have been paid at all, that he should, in fact, be calling the police. She swallows hard. Sure. I can come in. Great. 9 a.m. The call ends. She swings her legs over the side of the bed, rubbing her temples. There was no way she was getting through this day without caffeine. Eli is still asleep as she gets ready, and for once, she doesn't have to rush him out the door. It feels strange to put on business clothes again, considering she thought she was officially done with Valor Industries. She settles on a simple blouse and blazer, something neutral, something that doesn't scream I accidentally impersonated a CEO. The drive to the office feels different this time. The last time she drove here, she was bracing herself for disaster, convinced she'd be escorted out by security. Now, she has no idea what to expect. She steps into the building, scanning for Sophie or anyone who might greet her, but instead, the receptionist simply gestures her toward the elevators. She rides up in silence, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, mentally preparing for whatever conversation is about to happen. When she steps out on the executive floor, she expects to be led straight to Sebastian's office. Instead, a woman in a crisp suit gestures her in another direction. Ms. Bennett, this way, please. Madison follows, frowning when she realizes where they're headed. HR. Panic slams into her chest. She's barely seated before an HR representative walks in, a neatly organized file in hand. Madison grips the arms of her chair. Should I have brought a lawyer? The woman, her nameplate says Diane, smiles politely, like she's used to nervous employees. There's no need for that. Madison squints. There's not. Diane slides a folder across the table. This is a job offer. Madison blinks. I'm sorry, what? Diane folds her hands. Mr. Hayes has requested you stay on as his permanent executive assistant. There are a lot of words in that sentence, but none of them make sense. She opens the folder, skimming the paperwork, waiting for the punchline. This is real? Quite real. Why would he do that? Diane's smile doesn't falter. He believes someone who managed to do what you did is too valuable to let go. Madison lets out a weak laugh. What I did was accidentally commit fraud. Diane's expression remains neutral. You also kept the company running under significant pressure. That's not something most people can do. Madison stares at her. This has to be some sort of elaborate joke. She looks back down at the paperwork, flipping through the pages, waiting to find a section that says just kidding. Instead, she sees salary details, benefits, a real contract for a real job that real people apply for after years of actual corporate experience. Let me get this straight, she says slowly. Sebastian knows I'm not qualified, that I had no idea what I was doing, that I was making everything up as I went, and he still wants to hire me? Diane nods. Correct. Madison laughs again, a little delirious this time. She keeps flipping through the contract, still half expecting a trap. But it's all there. A steady salary. Health insurance. Paid vacation. The kind of benefits she's never had, not once in her life. She glances up. If I say no, is this the part where security escorts me out? Diane's lips twitch. No, but I imagine Mr. Hayes would be disappointed. That shouldn't mean anything. She shouldn't care what a billionaire CEO thinks. But for some reason, the thought of him being disappointed makes her hesitate. She exhales, staring down at the contract, her brain firing in a million directions. I need a second. Of course. Take your time. Madison presses her palms against the table, letting herself breathe. She can't believe she's even considering this. She spent the last week convinced she was about to be thrown in jail, and now she's staring at a legitimate job offer. A good job. A job that could actually change things for her and Eli. She shouldn't be taking this seriously. And yet. She glances up. I have one question. Diane lifts a brow. Yes? What's the employee discount situation? There's a beat of silence. Then Diane actually laughs. Madison smirks, shaking her head. Okay. Where do I sign? Diane hands her a pen. Madison hesitates for just a second longer, then signs her name. A rush of disbelief hits her all at once. This is real. This is happening. She closes the folder, shaking Diane's hand. Welcome to Valor Industries, Diane says. Madison laughs, standing. You do know I still have no idea what I'm doing, right? Diane shrugs. You'll learn. Madison walks out of the office, still stunned, still trying to process how the universe let her get away with this. She barely makes it to the elevator before her phone buzzes. She glances at the screen. It's Eli's school. Her stomach drops. She snatches the phone up immediately. Hello? Hi, Ms. Bennett, the front office receptionist says. Just a heads up, Eli forgot his gym shoes for practice this afternoon. He was hoping you could drop them off. Madison sags against the elevator wall in relief. Oh. Yeah. Of course. She pockets her phone just as the doors slide open. A job. A real job. One that pays well, that has benefits, that might actually make things easier. And yet, here she is, sprinting to her car because her kid forgot his shoes. She shakes her head, grinning. Some things never change.